Good afternoon. My name is Laurie O'Coin, and this is my video blog on the validity and credibility grid for College for America in reference to 3 different news stories and articles that I read. The first one I want to start off with was grief and protests follow shooting of a teenager. The source for this story was the New York Times, and the article was actually written August 10th, 2014. So what we want to do is establish whether or not these stories are within, pass or fail within the grid of validity and credibility. So one of the first things that I noticed about this article was that it definitely was independently reported. In researching the 2 writers of the article, Julie Bosman and Emma Fitzsimmons, there is no indication that either woman was involved or personally affected by the police-involved shootings that occurred. Multiple sources are utilized throughout the story: the family of Michael Brown, the chief of police, advocacy groups, and elected officials. And there are several quotes that are listed. The article also includes several opinions and points of view, which creates a balance on both sides of the argument. And the information that I read throughout the story came from many different sources, but they were assertions and claims without evidence to support what was being stated. For example, the chief of police quoted, "The genesis of this was a physical confrontation." However, because this is still an active investigation, there's nothing to confirm that it actually was a physical altercation that led to Michael's death. And then we had Esther Haywood of the NAACP. She's quoted as saying, "We strongly encourage residents to stay away from the crime scene so that no additional citizens will be injured." So this statement bears no evidence to support what it is that she's saying. There's nothing that would indicate that anyone would be injured simply by being around the crime scene where it's an active investigation. However, I did note in this article that they took a very authoritative approach because the information came from, sources such as chief of police, a city councilman, and the president of the NAACP. So by giving the job titles within the article, there's an indication of authority and knowledge that one could assume in the statements that are being made. All of the sources in the article are named sources, and by naming the sources and providing job titles, there's a tendency to lean towards the article being more credible to the readers. For me personally, I believe components of the article are credible, such as the fact that there was an officer-involved shooting that resulted in the death of Michael Brown. Having said that, there are other pieces of the article that are open to opinion and interpretation as to what may or may not happen. So, the story itself is written in the early stages after the shooting has occurred, and it doesn't provide any evidence-based facts to draw a specific conclusion one way or the other. So depending on your belief in what's going on in the world today as to who you think is right and who is wrong, you're left to your own thoughts and opinions about what should actually happen next. The article is newsworthy. They're reporting an actual incident that has occurred with the loss of human life. There's enough information from multiple sources to give insight into this particular article. The next article that I reviewed was the Apple press release announcing the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus, with the headline stating it's one of the biggest advancements in iPhone history. This is a self-interest story. A press release comes directly from the company. It comes from Apple in reference to their product. It includes information on their product. Teresa Brewer is the public relations manager at Apple, and Nat Karras is Apple's senior director of worldwide corporate communications. There's one source used throughout the complete press release. There's quotes that come from the CEO of the company. The article is definitely one-sided, as it embellishes their product. Their phone uses choice words in describing the product to the reader. This article is riddled with assertions and claims about the phone. As a press release, there's a spin and play on words in order to describe the product, because the purpose of the press release is actually to increase sales of the iPhone 6. In regards, there are several claims by Apple that their products are better, they're faster, they're more advanced, they're more efficient, but there isn't any actual product comparison or information that would tell us that the assertions that they're making are true. There's a lot of technological words and jargon that are used throughout the release, and most standard readers wouldn't know or understand what that meant. So this in itself shows the extent that Apple is going to with the press release just to justify a product. They attempt to take an authoritative approach in the release by quoting Tim Cook, the CEO. Who better to bring you the information on this new product than the CEO of the company? However, being a press release, we should pay attention to the purpose. And the purpose is to sell a product to consumers. And it's a consumer that's in constant competition with other phone manufacturers. They're trying to increase their sales and sell more iPhone 6. So, like I said, the only name source throughout the whole thing is Tim Cook. Without other sources to draw upon, the information is one-sided to Apple and Apple only. There are no facts that support the press release being credible. Descriptions are provided. There's a play on words. Without comparison to other products or the ability to verify the information that we're reading, we're left with nothing more than an opinion of the Apple Corporation. If you're an iPhone owner, you already have a drawn opinion and a conclusion as to whether you like the product and stand by the product or not. So I don't consider this news. Instead, it's a press release that's full of information that's being pushed out by Apple Corporation in an attempt to further increase sales of their products. The third article that I reviewed for this project was Vicious Assault Shakes Texas Town. It was reported in the New York Times, March 8th, 2011. James McKinley is the journalist who reported this out. He's been with the New York Times since he's been an American journalist since 1989. He independently writes the story. There's no indication anywhere that James had any personal connection to the story and was reporting out on a crime that had occurred in Cleveland, Texas. There are multiple sources used throughout the story, but there is no use of professional authorities or dissenting community members who could balance out this story. I found the story to be very one-sided. We're presented with a gang rape that was perpetrated by 18 boys and men against an 11-year-old girl. The sources give the impression that they were more concerned for the men involved and how this may have damaged their life or how they knew of them. And there wasn't much in the article. It lacked any compassion or details about the horrible act that had actually been committed upon a child. It relies heavily on quotes from individuals who give the impression that they blame the victim. There was a lack of information on reporting the details on the boys and the men involved, and an overemphasis, I believe, on the fact that this was a poor community where the assault occurred. And it kind of left me with a feeling of outrage and anger. The story completely lacks balance. And as written, it's full of assertions and opinions. There's nothing fact-based. Statements given by community members is in fact just their opinion. They're not followed up with anything to be able to verify one way or the other the statements that they made, either in regards to the assailants or the victim. There's no supporting information from the police, who are conducting an active investigation. So instead, we're left to draw our own conclusion as to what happened based on the summation of others in the community. We're also provided with information from an affidavit that was listed in the article that was used to secure the search warrant. But we have to keep in mind that an affidavit is deemed as the facts of a case to be presented in a court of law. The affidavit would be considered fact-based for proceeding forward in the investigation, but that's the only evidence-based information that this particular story provided. It's written in an uninformed manner. All of those that were interviewed for this were members of the community. They had no expertise over the incident that had occurred. We're presented with opinions of neighbors who are depicted as low income in poverty-stricken area of Texas, which is called the Quarters. In addition to that, statements are made that the 11-year-old girl dresses older than what she is, that she visits and hangs out with older teenagers in the area. Others made comments, where was her mother? And it gives you the impression this girl was left unattended to do what she wanted as she wished without any adult supervision. There's also the impression that because of all these opinions, the little girl asked for what she got. One-sided reporting like this, with the lack of any authoritative experts on the subject matter, to me, creates a very uninformed article that's being sent out to the public. There are named sources as well as unnamed sources in the article. However, there's nothing within the named sources that are used that would give us any impression that there'd be any fact or expertise-based knowledge in reference to the incident. And almost all of the sources throughout this article were opinion-based statements by somebody in the community. There was no conversation with the girl's family, the law, or somebody who may have been able to balance out. So this was a very unbalanced, one-sided story. It is credible because it tells us what happened to the 11-year-old girl, and it tells us how many assailants were involved. And, you know, through details of the affidavit, we can understand the horrible act that occurred. The article can be confirmed and verified through the local police department or the courthouse because that would be public information. The crime did occur, but unfortunately the reporting of the article was so one-sided and poorly presented to the readers. It's an injustice in journalistic reporting to put an article out like this without showing the other side of the issue. It is news and it is newsworthy. We see headlines like this every day in today's world. To me, what happened in Texas is a horrible circumstance, and the public does need to know the dangers that are lurking in the world today. Unfortunately, it's not an article that you could pull a lot of verified information from. I think it left me instead angry and outraged that we would report a story like this about an 11-year-old girl in such a manner. Thank you.